Hare Krishna, everyone. Thank you so much for switching in, for listening in to that presentation. First lesson, first part of the introduction. And I do think we need a little introduction simply because that topic is not discussed too often. We may be used to loft classes or outreach classes, right? We may be used to temple classes. But the topic of men and women doesn't come up too often, too deeply anyway, in a matter that actually gives us deeper understanding about the mechanics behind it, right? So it's not this typical outreach class, not that typical temple class, right? It's different. When we come to Krishna consciousness, what do we hear first? Usually we hear how we're not the body, how we're spirit soul. That the body is just a vehicle, and we, the soul, are just a driver. And at death we change the old and useless body and like clothed, put on a new body, and so on. And even before we chant 16 rounds, right, we preach that to others. Hey, I've been with those Hare Krishnas, and wow, that's really interesting. It's about how we're not the body, how we're spirit, soul, and so on. So that's introductory, right? That's what Krishna tells Arjuna in the second chapter once he starts talking, and preaching it up to Arjuna. That's what he says first, that we're not the body, that we're spirit, soul. So that's the ABC, the basis of our philosophy, right? And then later on, if you have the choice, do we want to hear about nectar of devotion, or how we're not the body but the spirit soul? We choose nectar of devotion, because it's old news, right? So it will be different, that presentation. But just a question: what makes you think that you're preaching, if you tell others that you're not the body but spirit soul, is actually effective if you don't know it yourself? If you don't believe it yourself? What do you mean, you may ask? I know that we are not the body, we are spirit soul. Really? As soon as the topic is men and women and spiritual culture, generally we forget all about chapter 2 in Bhagavad Gita. Lost and forgotten. And we're so much the body. Right? The battle lines are drawn, we're armed and ready in the trenches, just waiting for the signal. Say it, just say it, and I'll give it back to you. Right? It's like an indicator, like a test strip, for the pH. Yeah, you want to know if that watery solution, if it's alkaline or acidic. You put that paper strip in and you look at the colors and it turns into the bluish, purplish, must be alkaline, or it's more on the yellow-orange side, so it's acidic. As soon as we're confronted with men and women in spiritual culture, boom, that's the indication. Do we actually know we're not the body or not? And unfortunately, in most cases, I believe the indicator says nope. Right? And that's natural. Because we have so much emotion, so much attachment, so many desires are attached to that topic of men and women's relationships. There's so much emotional attachment involved, a heart investment in there. So it's very difficult to actually transcend, right? To understand that we are not that body, that we are spirit, soul. We forget very easily then. But that's how we should approach that topic, right? Because we are not the body, we are not spirit, soul. We're not the body, we are spirit, soul, right? So we are helplessly trapped in this body, gross and subtle. We are tortured by our mind, tortured by our senses, tortured by all the situations thrown upon us. And we're suffering. It needs some humility to admit that, of course, but ultimately we're suffering, we're sick of it, we're over it, we just want to make a solution, right? We want to make a solution to that. And in Krishna consciousness, the solution is to actually understand who we are, obviously in relation to Krishna. Right? We are das, the eternal servant of the servant of the servant, spirit, soul, part and parcel of Krishna, right? And we need help. We need help in re-establishing that our very identity, right? And all the bodily designations, we have to lose them ultimately. It's in our way to engage in devotional service, right? But without that almost humble, helpless state of heart, it will be very difficult for us to actually transcend our bodily concept of life. And it's so deeply ingrained, right? The false ego is so strong. We identify since birth as that body, as our minds. Right? So it's understandable. But we have to understand that Krishna's system of Varnashrama Dharma, the duties we have to perform in our particular ashram according to our natures, they are meant to purify us, to help us shedding that false ego and ultimately be able to engage in his devotional service, because he wants us back. He wants to associate again with us, probably more than we do want to associate with Krishna himself, right? He wants to associate with us more than we want to associate with him, right? So he gives us all facility to actually come back to him. And that's Krishna's system. And Krishna's system is perfect. No one is the loser in Krishna's system. When we make up our own system, usually we try to make us the winner, and ultimately everyone else has to somehow lose. But oftentimes no one wins, including us. That's our concoctions. They're not perfect. They're nonsense. Right? But Krishna's system is perfect. All our needs are fulfilled. Right? And while we fulfill our needs, we very gently receive the purification, bite-sized, step by step, according to the stage of life we're in, according to our natures, which we need to slowly get rid of our false ego and purify our existence. Right? So to approach that topic of men and women in spiritual culture, we really have to at least theoretically approach it from the transcendental understanding how we are not the body. We don't want to have any woman consciousness, any man consciousness, any feminist consciousness, any macho consciousness. No, we cannot approach it like this. At least theoretically we should be able, to focus and say, no, we're not the body. Let me hear. What can I learn? Because ultimately we have to ask ourselves, well, I'm here in that situation. How can I get out? Please help. What do I need to do? Right? And so we have to act according to our situation. Right? Often when we accept, yes, I understand, I'm not the body. Therefore, I can just do whatever I want. Right? Doesn't matter, because I'm not the body, right? I don't have to act like a human being. I can act like a dog, or vice versa. No. There are duties for the husband, duties for the wife, duties for the parents, and so on. But we don't understand this topic of duty. We may pretend to understand, okay, we're not the body, but duties. The husband can be a better wife, the wife can be a better husband. Right? No, that's not how it works. We have that example in Mahabharata, right? How Arjuna was able to kill Bhishma, right? By having a personality on his chariot who was a woman in his last life. But nevertheless, he was doing his duties of the current body he was in. Right? So in this way, everyone was accepting him. Yes, he is a woman. He was a woman in his last life. He's still a woman. So Bhishma didn't defend himself on the chariot. And this way Arjuna was victorious. Right? So he did his duty according to the body. In the same way we have to do our duties according to our body. Even if we can't perform our duties very well, the result is not so important. The effect on our heart, on our consciousness, that's the important thing. And that's designed by Krishna to help us purifying ourselves so we can engage in his service. Getting rid of our false ego. And even if we can perform a duty of someone else so much better, perfectly, it doesn't help us coming back home, back to Krishna. And that's the whole purpose of devotional service. Right? So we have to keep that in mind when we talk about men and women. Duties of husband and wife. Right? And the difficult thing is here, our false ego doesn't allow it. And that will be the topic of the next introductory session, before we actually deep dive into the topic, will be the false ego. Our constant companion and troublemaker, as the title of Devaki Mataji's book suggests, and it is our constant companion and troublemaker. And I only give a brief introduction here, but let's summarize the first lesson. Women cannot understand the topic of men and women in spiritual culture. Sorry, that was a test. Men can't understand it either, because we're not men, we're not women, right? We're spirit soul. We can only actually understand that topic properly from that standpoint of understanding. I am spirit soul. I'm not this body, not this male body, not this woman body, not this mind, not this intelligence, not this false ego. I am spirit soul. What do I need to do to be myself again? As a servant of Krishna, how do I can come back home, back to Godhead? With this desire, with this understanding, and if it's just theoretically, hypothetically, with this understanding we have to approach that whole topic. And we shouldn't take any feminist luggage or macho luggage with us. That will only deprive us from the opportunity to understand that more deeply and avoid so many unnecessary arguments, conflicts, and so on. And we can focus our energy to the real goal of re-establishing our relationship with Krishna. Thank you very much. I hope I see you again in the next session about the false ego. Hare Krishna.